Hi, everybody, and welcome to week 4 of American Popular Culture. I really enjoyed reading all your posts about David Sedaris. I'm glad you guys liked the book. I thought you had a lot of interesting things to say about it. I hope you maybe look into his other books or some of his live performances because he's really funny. This is also a friendly reminder that your first paper is due tomorrow night, Monday, 7/21, by midnight. So make sure you get those in on time. And I will try to grade and get those back to you as soon as possible. I'm also going to allow you to revise them. I must always let students revise their papers, so that will be an option. Also, I will try to get you a midterm grade sometime this week in eCampus, so you have an idea of where you are grade-wise in the class since we're halfway there. Okay, so I'm excited to talk about The Office this week. I love The Office. I have, seen the whole series in its entirety. I watched it when it was, live on TV. And it's a really good show. And the reason I wanted to do it for our class is because it actually does a lot of groundbreaking and unconventional things for a typical sitcom. Now, if you didn't know, sitcom actually stands for situational comedy, okay? And a lot of situational comedies are kind of centered around the same idea, right? Like a group of friends or a group of people are put into situations and then we laugh about how they deal with them, right? Makes sense. So the reason The Office is different is for a couple reasons. And the first one I want to talk about is setting. The Office takes place in a typical American office. It's just a brick building. They only have a floor, so it's divided up into office suites. The workers drive there. They are in cubicles. They're wearing, kind of typical normal clothes. And you might not think that much about it, but think of the other kind of sitcoms where people are and where they work. Like Friends is a really great example because Friends, they're all in New York. They're all glamorous and they all have like great jobs, right? I mean, Rachel works for Ralph Lauren. Ross is a paleontologist. Joey is on soap operas, right? And later, when we get to How I Met Your Mother in a couple weeks, like those guys, they all live in New York. They all have glamorous jobs, lawyer, news reporter, architect, whatever Barney does, something, right? Um, and so not only do they have glamorous jobs, but they're in glamorous locations, right? Like New York City, San Francisco, Seattle, right? And where does The Office take place? Scranton, Pennsylvania, the middle of nowhere, right? So it's actually what The Office is trying to do is make an ironic commentary about the banal or banality, right? And if you don't know what that word means, the best way to kind of explain it is like if something's banal, it's like unromantic, almost like Neanderthal, just like totally boring. Oh, that's so banal, right? So uncultured, so unsophisticated, right? And The Office takes that idea of the everyday banality that the typical American lives and just laughs at it, right? Just makes fun of it the whole time, which I think is really smart and really funny. Um, the second thing that makes The Office so groundbreaking is the idea of the mockumentary, right? And that's the fact that the show is based on the fact that there is a documentary crew making a film about the typical American worker. And that allows the show to kind of manipulate and interact with the audience in a way that hasn't really been done before. And it may not seem very groundbreaking to you because you've seen Parks and Recreation and Community and Modern Family and other shows that have now adopted this kind of like one-on-one camera approach. But The Office really was kind of the groundbreaker of that style of filming. And the reason that style is so interesting is, yes, it's meta, right? We talked about meta. It's a show within a show, right? A representation within a representation. And so that does really interesting things. But more so, what it allows is it allows the characters to break the fourth wall. Now, if you haven't heard of the fourth wall before, it's actually a theater term. So what that means is if you're sitting in a theater watching a play, there's the three walls of the stage, right? The background and the two sides. And then the fourth wall is directly in front of you, but it's invisible, right? It's what keeps what's happening on stage and what's happening in the audience happening in the audience. And whenever a character or an actor breaks the fourth wall, that's when they turn and face the audience and directly address them. Okay, so they're breaking the fourth wall. They're acknowledging that people are out there, right? Well, The Office does the same thing, right? Because we have these one-on-one shoots with the characters, but also when the shots are not one-on-one, when they're, out in the office as a group, we have the characters looking directly into the camera and offering facial expressions, which tells the audience how they should feel about a situation, right? So if Michael Scott is saying something ridiculous and kind of racist, and the camera pans in on Jim, and he raises his eyebrows or gives a quirky face, Jim is telling us, oh man, look at that guy. So we, the audience, become in on the joke with Jim. And so that's really fascinating because it makes us feel more connected to the characters, right? And it also eliminates the need for a laugh track. Did you notice that there's no laugh track in The Office? Most sitcoms have the laugh track, right? Like the pre-recorded audience laughing that they play when something's supposed to be funny. Well, The Office doesn't do that because instead we have characters like Jim or Pam or Dwight or whoever who look into the camera and say, hey, did you get that joke between you and me? Do you see how ridiculous he's being right now? And that's what indicates to us how we should feel. In that same sense, that makes the show kind of manipulative, right? Because the characters are kind of telling us how we should feel. So like in the very first episode, when we're getting introduced to all the characters in season 1, I think how we're supposed to feel about the characters is pre-established for us, right? Like we're directed to feel a certain way. And it's not that that's not true in other sitcoms, because it is, but because of that one-on-one camera filming, I think it's a little more aggressive in directing us how we should feel. We immediately feel that Jim's the cool guy, right? That he's the center of the show. Now, a lot of people would argue and say, no, Michael Scott's the center of the show. Maybe, but who do we turn to understand Michael Scott? We turn to Jim's reactions, right? So the show might be about Michael Scott, but we see it mostly through Jim's perspective. So the show kind of is really about Jim, right? So immediately we're supposed to trust Jim as the most rational and most normal guy in the office, right? We're also immediately supposed to feel sorry for Pam that she's with Roy because Roy is a big bully and a big jerk, right? And we're supposed to immediately desperately want Jim and Pam to get together. They're, that clandestine romance. We want them to be together. We are also directed to feel that Michael Scott is ignorant and racist and ridiculous, but we feel sorry for him. And I think that's really interesting, especially when we think about how we looked at race in Family Guy and how we looked at race and sexism in the David Sedaris book. What does it mean that Michael makes all these outlandish comments, but we feel sorry for him? So because we feel sorry for him, do we dismiss those outlandish comments? Do those comments no longer make him racist or sexist? What are we supposed to do with that? So I'm interested to see what you guys think about that. Real briefly, I want to touch on some particular elements of the episodes. So I said in the first episode of season 1, we're getting introduced to all the characters. And it's funny because if you have watched The Office in its entirety, to go back and watch the first season, just the 6 short episodes, is kind of weird because the only important characters in the first season are Dwight, Michael, Jim, and Pam, and everyone else is kind of on the periphery, right? Everyone else is on the outskirts. We really don't care about them. But man, by the end of the series, like Phyllis is important, Angela is important, you know, all those people end up being important. But in the first season, they're just kind of in the background. So with that being said, does The Office fulfill stereotypes? Like we talked about racial, sexist, family stereotypes in Family Guy and also in Sedaris. Like, does The Office fulfill any of those stereotypes? What stereotypes are the characters fulfilling, or are they not? What do you think? Okay. The next episode I really want to focus on is on episode 2, because we did talk so much about race and sexism in Family Guy and the Sedaris book. So episode 2 is the Diversity Day one, right? And, you know, we find out that they have to have this seminar because Michael Scott was reenacting a Chris Rock sketch about black people, which, you know, was very not sensitive of him. And so it brings up an interesting point. We talked a little bit about David Sedaris, and David Sedaris saying, you can't be colorblind, right? You can't say, I'm not racist because, you know, I'm colorblind. I don't see people's colors, because you can't do that, because by denying that race exists, you kind of perpetuate racism, right? Like, well, I'll just pretend that race doesn't exist. Well, then if you pretend that, then you're trying to pretend that racial struggles don't exist. You know, you try to pretend that stereotypes against black people or Latino people or women or Asians or whoever, right? You're trying to pretend that those don't exist if you refuse to see color, right? And it's interesting because there's that scene where Mr. Brown, the guy leading the seminar, is like, you can't be colorblind. That's not what we're here for. We need to acknowledge other races, but we need to do it in a, you know, a sensitive and a good manner. And of course, Michael Scott just totally dismisses everything and, you know, starts playing that really offensive game. But again, we're supposed to feel sorry for him. We're supposed to, oh, Michael Scott, you don't know what you're doing. You're so ignorant and dumb. Ha ha ha, we feel sorry for you. And so how is that a different way of approaching racism than Family Guy and Sedaris? And is it more effective or less effective? What do you think? The other thing I don't really want to talk about any episodes in particular, maybe episode 5 and episode 6, about Michael Scott's interaction with women, okay? So first of all, he's a total moron with women, right? And we're supposed to see that and think it's funny. But he's also kind of a total jerk, right? He's a total jerk to Pam all the time. He always talks down to her. He's always sexist. Like when the purse girl comes and they're like, look, it's a new and improved Pam 2.0. And like just terrible things he says all the time, right? And then his interactions with the purse girl in episode 6 are just ridiculous. But in the end, we feel sorry for him anyway. So what do you think about the way Michael talks to women? Because we're supposed to see it as wrong and offensive, but then we feel sorry for Michael because he just doesn't seem to know what he's doing. But like those things happen in real life, and in real life, if you're a woman and a man talks down to you like that, are we just supposed to say, oh, well, he just doesn't know any better, you know, poor love? Like, I don't think so, right? So I want you to think about how Michael interacts with women in The Office as you watch the 6 episodes. The other thing I wanted to touch upon briefly is the relationship between Pam and Jim, right? Now, this relationship does a lot of interesting things, because The Office is supposed to kind of be making this like awesome commentary about how ridiculous like everyday life is like in a typical office, but yet we're getting this very traditional, very over romanticized love story, you know, 2 lovers that can't be together. They don't see, you know, one doesn't see that she should leave the guy to be with the other and blah, 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 right? It's so overdone, right? How many times have we seen this? Yet, at the same time, we as viewers have expectations that they will get together, right? And if they didn't get together, we would be upset, don't you think? We would be like, no, Jim and Pam obviously belong together. They need to be together. But what does that say if our expectations are that they have to be together and that those expectations have to be fulfilled, right? When their relationship is just so ridiculous. I mean, it gives people an unrealistic expectation of what an actual relationship looks like. You know, in a lot of ways, Pam is a very tamed down version of the manic pixie dream girl. And I don't know if you've heard that term before, but it's what people often apply to like Zoe Deschanel, a New Girl, because she's like a quirky hipster, but really smart, but also like really gentle and really funny and quirky, but also really sexy and hot. And they call it the manic pixie dream girl because she doesn't exist, right? Like it's ridiculous. It's just another stereotype of a woman, right? You know, supermodel, blonde bimbo, manic pixie dream girl. So is Pam a tamed down version of that? And is Jim a tamed down version of like the ultimate hipster cool guy, the ultimate jock cool guy? You know, so what is the show actually achieving by them getting together? Besides that, most of the show is kind of based on their relationship, right? So I want you to think about their relationship as you go on watching the first season. Finally, I just want to talk a little bit about capitalism, and because part of the idea that they're working in an office that makes paper products is it's all about capitalism, right? Like running the rat race, and like making paper is a great example of capitalism because we don't think of paper as something glamorous or important, but like paper runs capitalism, right? And they have to produce this product and sell the product, right? And design the product, and that's all part of capitalism. And but yet we see the absurdity of all these people sitting around the office just to sell paper. So I want you to think about what kind of commentary on capitalism is being made. There's an article I'm going to have you read by Eric Detweiler, and I just want to read you a quick quote from page 741 about his opinions on how the show deals with capitalism, and he says, "The Office thus winks ironically at the ambitions of both old and new capitalism, but provides no alternate ways of finding meaning and surviving capitalist environments other than dating or befriending one's co-workers or adopting an ironic stance toward one's situation." So that's really interesting because he's basically saying that the show says there's no solution to capitalism in America or to this banality, right, of you're going to get a boring office job, you're going to work there, maybe you'll meet your spouse there, and life goes on, right? He said the show offers no solution except, well, you might as well accept your position, make friends, and then make fun of your job, right? And I think that's a really interesting way of looking at how the show deals with things like capitalism and American culture when it comes to the workplace. So I hope you enjoy watching the show and the discussion questions that are posted, and I look forward to see what you have to say. Okay, see you next week.